Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm really excited for the gentleman that I have on today because he and I have just gotten a chance to meet through a mutual connection. But we could talk about that a little bit, but anyways, I'm really excited because I chatted with him a couple weeks ago, and he's just a really, really good guy, and he's got a great story. So I'm excited to welcome Rocky Anderson to Dad Up. Welcome to the show, Rocky.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. For my listeners, may not know who you are, much about you. Let's dive into a little bit of back history of you, kind of how you grew up and obviously how you got into the things that you're doing now. And then this is a dad podcast, so I want to know about your family as well.
Yeah. So, um, who I am now, I own an engineering firm. We design wastewater treatment systems. And I've not done anything with my music in a couple of years, but I'm a recording artist. I've got some music up on Spotify, and I've got a recording studio up in Tacoma in a big event space and a big loft up there that we operate our office out of as well. And so I grew up in a small town called Kent in Washington State, in Western Washington. There used to be jokes about kentificating because it was definitely out in the woods in the day. It's been suburbanized now and gentrified and all that stuff. But I it's an interesting, from a parent standpoint, it was really interesting because I did not have any sort of good model whatsoever as to how to be a parent. I grew up in a highly abusive and neglectful situation. In fact, it's interesting because I've had to go back and interview I have three older sisters, 2, 4, and 6 years older than me. And I've had to go back and interview them about my childhood because there were parts that I just couldn't piece together. And then there were parts where I actually thought I was a lot older than I really was when they happened. It turns out I was a lot younger when a lot of these events happened than I thought I was. And I've even had to reach out to old friends from my teenage years because there are so many dead spots where I have them tell me stories and I'm like, man, I don't remember that. Like literally, even with you telling me all the detail that you have, I cannot remember it. And so from what my sisters tell me, my mom started physically abusing me when I was like 10 days old. And it didn't stop until I got strong enough then just one day she was afraid, of repercussions. So she stopped. And it was really interesting. I don't know if it's like this for, most, for kids who grow up in abusive families, but, it'd be like you never knew when it was coming. I remember one day I was probably like 3 or 4 years old, and I was sitting at the bar in the kitchen eating my corn pops. Remember corn pops? And it used to be like my favorite cereal when I was a kid. And I could hear my mom. I'm just there by myself eating my cereal, and I could hear my mom from the basement starting to scream. And my sisters were all up on the main floor. I was in a bedroom. I was in a kind of finished bedroom in an unfinished basement next to an unfinished garage downstairs. So like from when I was a little tiny boy, I've always just kind of like been the outcast in my family. But I can hear her screaming, and as she starts coming up the stairs, I already know she's screaming at me, but I can't. I already know that, but I can't hear her saying what she's saying yet. And then of course she's coming up the stairs. I can hear my name, and I'm just sitting there like I can still remember like detaching myself from my body, and just like I'm still eating the corn puffs, whatever corn pops as she's coming up the stairs, and I'm like reaching in to get another bite, and the next thing I know, she's like on me, and like the milk and the cereal go flying everywhere. I go flying to the floor, and I just remember like being curled up in a ball, just getting the shit beat out of me with a ping pong paddle, and just like whatever body part was exposed was the body part that got hit. And so I would just kind of like roll around trying to, get a different body part exposed, and that was basically how I grew up. And then I remember when I got a little bit older, I actually learned to trigger the violence, because I learned that if I kept multiple layers of blankets on my bed, multiple layers, like 8 or 9 blankets. And I remember I used to tell everybody, "Oh yeah, I love sleeping under so many blankets because it's just so cozy and warm." But the real reason was I could purposefully trigger my mom into the rage that she would eventually have anyway. And then I would just go sprinting back to my room, get under the covers, and then just let her wail on me with, belt buckle or whatever it was. But as long as she didn't get my head, then I would just scream like it hurt. And it was, it was a way of surviving kind of the second stage of her rage until I remember one day I was finally, I don't remember, I was probably like a preteen, and she'd done something, and I actually raised my hand at her, and she just cowered, like a scared little girl. And I didn't recognize it at the time. Now looking back, it's like, yeah, she's a scared little girl in a grown woman's body, basically. But I do remember just having this like pity for her in the moment. But and then my dad was he was kind of grew into being an alcoholic, and was just kind of detached from the whole thing. And when I was 13, they got divorced, and I thought that was going to be a really cool moment because I was going to be living with my dad. I was going to stay with my dad, but like right after my mom and my sister, who is second oldest, or the youngest of my three sisters, they moved out, and my dad comes walking into my bedroom, and he's like, "Well, you're a man now. You can take care of yourself. I'm going to start dating women, and I'm going to kind of do my own thing." So, that was just kind of it. That was the talk. And so it was like any hopes that I had of us actually getting a relationship together and spending time together and all that kind of stuff are just like out the window. And so I started kind of hanging. I was a pretty good kid, got pretty good grades all the way through, up until that point, until I was 13. And then I started just kind of like skipping school and hanging out with a different crowd. And one day I came home, and my dad and my sisters were sitting around the table smoking weed, and they were the ones who actually peer pressured me into smoking weed. I'd never smoked it before in my life. Even though I was like hanging out, I was starting to hang out with people who did that kind of stuff and was drinking, but I'd never smoked weed. And anyway, so then one day I came home and I had a bag of weed, and then suddenly I was a loser because I was smoking weed. That was kind of like how it was just kind of my upbringing. It was just like there was no way of winning. I went from being the outcast to being the loser. Ended up dropping out of high school at the end of the 10th grade, and then just kind of I eventually, I was doing a lot of music, and I was actually really good at it. And one day, I think it was because um, I met somebody young, ended up being really the wrong person for me. And I didn't realize the messaging that was already there, even when I was that young. But there was probably something in it. And in any case, I just dropped out of the music scene. I literally just disappeared. I actually found out about 8 years ago that a huge group of people were literally trying to track me down. They were trying to find me because they just couldn't, they couldn't like fathom me not being in music with them and building a career out of that. But just went on to kind of, had a few jobs, and realized that I wasn't really built for working for somebody else. And my dad he was a professional engineer, and so he kind of did septic designs on the side. And so I knew a little bit about doing septic designs and whatnot. And so I learned how to design septic systems, and then just became a septic system designer. And I was the production manager at a steel company, and ended up quitting that and becoming full-time septic designer. And I always thought it was going to be a temporary thing for me because it was just something to like get me out of a regular job. And then I would figure it out from there. And if I could just make 30 grand a year, I'd be doing great. Kind of what I was thinking back in the day. And I just got really good at working on highly complicated projects, but there were projects that required a professional engineer to stamp, and I didn't even have I did go back when I was like 20, and I took 2 classes at a community college. I got my high school diploma, so that I at least just kind of closed that loop. And but basically a high school dropout. I definitely am not a PE, by license or by education, but here I am working on these projects that I'm designing, but I have to have a PE stamp. So I ended up becoming an engineering firm, and then but I never really like tried to grow the firm or anything like that. I always try to like stay small. Didn't really have any particular big aspirations. And with my first marriage, it was pretty dysfunctional. We were in and out of therapy from before we were married. We'd been separated multiple times, and my wife had a habit of just telling me things like, "Well, you're just going to die young and leave me broke," and those kind of things. It was kind of a continuation of a lack of just not being around the right people. And we actually were together for 25 years, and then I'm a loyal person, and I think I have really high integrity, probably sometimes to a fault, and so I was trying to make a situation work just because I thought it was what I was supposed to do, not because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
And um, because in hindsight, it probably would have been better for both of us if it had just been ended way earlier. But yeah, after 25 years, we just kind of finally had the last fight, if you will. And I already had the recording studio loft built and all that. So I remember going over there and just had the epiphany that I'm just not going back. I'm just not going back. Um, so I immediately, I let her know we're done. I'm not doing this anymore. Um, Shoved. I basically just I pushed all the assets her way. I took all the debt, and then I immediately stopped taking any personal income. And so, because I wanted to make sure we adopted two older girls from while we were married. One was 15 years old when we adopted her from Russia, and then our second adopted daughter was 8 when we adopted her, and she was originally from Russia. The family that she was with had her for 3 years, and then they were disrupting the adoption, and they were just going to send her to some halfway house in the East Coast. And we found out about it and just decided we just said we take her, make her our daughter. And so she was just finishing up high school, and I wanted to make sure, at least if I was going to do this, that I was trying to do it as right as possible, if you will. So effectively, out of the divorce went about $300,000+ in high interest debt, and literally no money left. By the time that was all done, I mean, there was a year where every couple of months it would just be, it'd be a Sunday night, and I'd need, $10,000-$15,000 the next day to just pay my staff, pay my bills, all that stuff. And I'd have like $3,000 literally to my name with like everything's maxed out. I have nowhere to go for the money. And every time though, it's like I stayed focused on keeping my energy in the right place and focusing on, even if I can't send an invoice out, I can at least be pushing as much work forward as possible. So I can just be putting that energy into the universe that I'm moving forward. And it was a really good lesson in learning to not, because it was in that moment, in that first moment, that I was like sitting there thinking about it, because I'd never been in that position before, and just thinking, man, if I think for a moment that I'm screwed, I'm screwed. I cannot even afford to go there. So I had that quick thought, and I was just like, okay, so what can I do? I'm going to trust the money's going to be there. I don't know how, but I'm going to trust that it's going to be there, and I'm just going to keep pushing everything forward as hard as I can. And every time, it'd be like the middle of the night, waking up in the middle of the night on, between Sunday and Monday, and a client deposited 20 grand, and it's like, cool, I can breathe for like 2 weeks. I can breathe, right? But I literally went through that for, like, bottom for me was only about, gosh, I mean, everybody says, don't get divorced because it'll be the most expensive thing you ever do, and it was, but it was also the best decision I ever made for myself, because that was only, I think, bottom for me financially was only about 5 years ago. And since then I have completely rebuilt my firm into a 7-figure firm, and we're working on our way towards an 8-figure firm. And we're making more money than I've ever made in my life. And a lot of that is because I ended up remarrying. I'm positive a lot of that is because of the woman that I'm with. I mean, I think we can all do things on our own for sure as men, but I firmly believe, now that I understand what it's like to have a really positive, loving, and supportive relationship, how important that life partner can be for a man in particular. And I know it is for my wife as well, because we have a relationship where we build each other up, but without judgment. We hold each other accountable without judgment, if that makes sense. So there isn't, it's just, it's just a really cool, positive thing. And we met actually shortly after I got divorced. I figured I was never getting married again. Right. And I mean, women are crazy, right? It's like, no way, not doing it. And we went on a date. She's 18 years younger than me. And we went on a date, and, we were both just kind of messing around, and it just got serious really fast. And one of the conversations that came up early was, she's just like, look, I know you've already done this. And so like, I want to have, at least want to have a couple of kids. And I can't imagine that you would want to do that again. And so I don't want to she's like, I'm really like falling for you. At the same time, I don't want to like fall for someone who doesn't, the same future in mind as me. And I just remember thinking, man, definitely getting married again wasn't on my radar, and certainly having biological kids wasn't on my radar. But it actually, I remember telling her, with you, it actually seems like it could be a lot of fun, and it could be a real adventure. And so we actually started having these conversations like 2 months after we started dating. Around like, I was like, so if we're going to do this, I'd want to kind of do it old school. I don't want to raise turnkey kids. Because if I'm going to have kids, I'm going to start when I'm probably 50 years old. I'm in this for literally the rest of my life. So I don't want turnkey kids. I want to be intentional about how we're going to raise our kids, going on adventures, and really we're not going to be one of those families who wants to hurry up and get their kids out of the house. We're going to be one of those families who just built a tribe and are committed to each other. And so that would mean that, because she was on a career path, and I just said, so to me, it's like, I don't know a lot about myself yet, because I'm still learning about myself, because I've just gotten out of that 25-year marriage. But if there's one thing I do know, it's that I'm a provider, and I like to work, and I like to make money. And so that means there would be you that have to not have a job for a while we raise this family. And so we actually even started our relationship with her moving in and quitting her job, and we spent a year and a half or so in the process of, then I proposed to her, and then we got married, and then we ultimately had our our first daughter together. And but it was kind of a practice run about what does it look like to like not work and actually take care of a household, and all that kind of stuff. And then that evolved into, now we have our daughter is 5.5, and our son is almost 2.5. And it's been a really amazing journey. It's so much of now what I've learned about my childhood, and even about my first marriage, has been so valuable in me becoming the just the man and the dad that I am today. And I feel like I'm actually just getting started on my evolutionary process, if you will. But yeah, our mutual person, Ed Milet, has been he's been actually a huge influence on me over the last just about 2 years now. Been massive. And so yeah, that's kind of the backstory.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack. You know, I do want to start back though. When you're younger and you're in just kind of this abusive household,
Yeah.
and you mentioned about not having the memory of certain things and having to talk to people, your sisters and stuff, to really gain memory of that. Was that your way of blocking things out, you think, when you went through that kind of stuff? Or
It's interesting because I did go. Have you ever heard of EMDR?
Yeah.
But it's a light therapy. It's
Yep.
supposed to. I went through that, and that was really interesting, because that's actually a lot of where I started to learn that I was actually a lot younger when a lot of this. Like, I almost died of alcohol poisoning. My parents thought it would be a great idea to send me up to Unalakleet, Alaska. It's a little island and little village in Alaska, Native American village, and they thought it'd be great to send me up there with my raging alcoholic grandfather, who was who was in charge of the medical center, he owned a construction company, and they were building that medical center up there. So I literally went up there for a week, and first they put me up with so I flew by myself up to Alaska, and then I stayed a few days with my raging cocaine, marijuana, alcohol addicted uncle. And then flew over to Alaska to my raging alcoholic grandfather, and or flew over. That was in Anchorage, and then I flew over to Unalakleet and spent a week there. And I didn't spend any time with my grandfather. I spent the whole time, hanging out with the local kids and smoking cigarettes. And I rented a kid's motorcycle and was racing it through town. The cops were chasing me, trying to find me, and then we ended up finding a bottle of booze. There's a motorcycle parked right next to the runway, and there was just a gravel strip, and they'd fly big 727s in there on a gravel strip. And motorcycle parked outside, a Harley parked out there, and he's got a fifth of whiskey in his saddlebag. And so this kid that I had met, we just snagged the fifth out of there and went out to the beach and started drinking. And I literally, like, I remember the tide was rolling in, and that is something that I do remember. I remember being on the beach and everything's spinning, I'm spinning, and I can't stand up. And I cannot stand up. I keep trying and I can't. And the tide's coming in, and I'm in the tide, and like I can't get out of it. I can't crawl. I can't do anything. And there's this Native American guy over chainsawing driftwood, probably 200 feet from me, and he's like, I don't even exist. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm going to drown. Like I can't. I'm literally going to drown. And then finally, out of nowhere, my grandfather comes rolling up in his Jeep. So probably, I'm sure the guy did see me there. And then he told somebody, and then somebody else told my grandfather, and then he came over and got me. And he thought, it turns out my grandfather, it's a dry town, still is a dry town. My grandfather had brought all the booze. And so he thought basically he was responsible for killing his grandson, because it was bad. It was the rest of the trip, I was just sick, trying to recover from that. And it turns out I was about 10 years old when that happened. I thought I was older, but to answer your question, I don't know, because I do remember stuff intensely, but then there's just these gaps. And the biggest gaps are when I was a teenager, which is really weird because I experimented with acid and cocaine and that kind of stuff, but I wasn't like a hardcore drug user by any stretch. And there's just big stretches that I just flat out don't remember. I can't quite explain it. Maybe I am blocking, but that was certainly between my early childhood and my teenage years. The teenage years were far less. I mean, there wasn't necessarily anything traumatic in my teenage years other than just being an angst-ridden, long-haired delinquent, who didn't have any parents watching over him. So
You talk about, you learning basically how to be a parent by the mistakes that your parents made, and not going down that path. I mean, that's similar to me because my parents are still together to this day after 50 plus years, are still together.
Wow.
But I grew up in a house that my parents were loving, and they were attentive as much as they could be, but they were blue collar workers and they worked long hours, and they never came to anything that I participated in, whether it's sports or, school activities like open house, back to school night kind of things. They just weren't there. I used to remember going to, my practices and games. I would ride with my friends' parents because my parents just couldn't make it. And it's not that they didn't want to, it's just that they had to work. Right. And so I knew at a very young age, I'd say my teenage years, I knew at a very young age that I wasn't going to be that way as a dad. I wanted to make sure that I was involved as much as I could be when I did become a dad. And that's why I was the way I was with my boys. I was very involved in their lives. I can count on one hand how many things I may have missed of theirs. So I've always been active and an active participant as far as being a dad and being a husband to my wife. And for you, now that you have, two young kids, I'm sure, at those ages, I'm sure you're having to make sure your energy level is up so you can keep up with them and all that stuff. What part of of this new chapter of your life with these young kids? I call you a rookie dad, even though you've got two adoptive older kids, but you're really a rookie dad. But what part of this chapter of your life are you looking forward to as a dad?
I think Well, it's interesting because we are, it's fun watching our kids right now because they're just becoming little buddies, and I never had that when I was growing up. Like I said, I was the kid in the basement, right? My sisters were all older than me, and I was just on my own. And it's so cool watching those two just like buddy up. And I talk to my daughter all the time about being a leader and about being a leader to her brother, being a leader when she's hanging out with the neighbor kids who have different values than we do, and just taking the lead on things and understanding who she is in the matter socially. And man, I've watched that like change with her. She's in ballet, and she's just like, she used to be kind of one of the distracted kids. Now she's like the tiniest in her class. She's the youngest in her class, and she's like the most focused in there. I've watched her a couple of times. She's like super focused and intentional, and she's becoming a little mama to her brother, and really helping out with that stuff. And so it's like, on one hand we're on our way, and yet we just found out on Halloween, actually we just found out that we got a surprise coming. And so my wife is due with our third the
Oh,
first week.
wow.
Yeah, first week of July. So now it's like, oh. So I think it's only been in the last like month that we really both have just kind of like really gotten ourselves truly like, okay, we're done looking back, we're looking forward now. This is our new future, right? So we weren't expecting that, but now we get to go back and go through that whole cycle all over again, and try to figure out how we're going to fit a booster seat and two other car seats in the car and all that
Right.
kind of stuff that you don't really have to worry about with two kids, and traveling and everything else. And so on one hand, I'm actually starting to look forward to that a little bit because our son and daughter are both like just kind of becoming their own little entities, and so that's cool. But I think the part that I'm most looking forward to is as they start to get a little bit older, actually being able to kind of have a real um uh kind of mentorship, friendship kind of relationship. I mean, my daughter, she'll be 6 in late July, and I think she's probably only another maybe couple of years away from probably being able to travel with me. I travel a lot, especially back
Mhm.
up to Tacoma because I have staff up there and whatnot. And I want her to be able to kind of travel with me and work with me and hang out when I'm having meetings and that kind of thing. And she's still a little bit young for that, but I'm looking forward to that transition to where we can actually start to like, she can start to see what I'm doing and how I'm doing things and how I'm relating to people, and I can talk to her about that in a way that she can understand, and I can start to help build her and then eventually my son up as leaders themselves. Regardless of what it is they choose to do in life. I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing in our society today is leadership, true leadership. And you don't have to run a company. You don't have to run, you don't have to be a multimillionaire or a billionaire to be a leader. You can be a trash collector and be a leader. You can
Yeah.
you can be an artist and be a leader. Um, you can travel the world and be a free thinker and be a leader. And I think that I just feel like I think there's just been a lot of overall kind of hijacking of leadership over the last 15, 20 years. And it's,
Mhm.
I think for me it's important to raise leaders, whatever it is my kids end up doing. And so I'm looking forward to that phase as I continue to grow, as I continue to learn more about myself. It's actually kind of perfect in a way because I'm coming into my best self just as my kids are starting to grow um, into people that can start to hear that kind of stuff. Their frontal cortexes are starting to develop, and they can have real conversations. And
Yeah.
well, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. That's cool. So you're looking forward to that phase of life, of their life, where they can actually start to really comprehend what their dad does and learn the techniques of, interacting with people and such as you're now having a baby.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So,
And Yeah, and yeah, and you're right, from the physical part, it's like that is a huge part of, like, I'm up at 4 a.m. every day. I work out 6 days a week. I'm in definitely, other than, I mean, even in my, my mid 20s, I had a six pack, but I'm in better shape now as far as, like, I don't have any aches and pains. I run long distances. I'm stronger than I was in my mid 20s, and it's really exciting, actually, I'll be 56 in June, and I feel the best I have ever felt in my life, and I'm a
Well, you
firm
could
believer.
probably thank your wife for that because
Yeah,
she's a little bit younger than you. So,
yeah, that helps too. That definitely helps, and it's a huge part of it. Just having her support is so huge. I mean, we don't want it's in fact, it's interesting. We've never watched TV since we met. We just don't
oh,
watch TV. And so once in a blue moon we'll watch a movie. And I mean, it's really rare that we'll watch a movie. Our daughter, Nevada, they went on a little bit of binge while my wife was in her nausea stage of the pregnancy. And so they watched a handful of movies. But I mean, even at that, I'll bet my daughter, who's approaching 6 years old, has probably seen a dozen movies, and that includes, like, the original Frosty the Snowman, the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and
classics.
classics. Yeah. And I mean, she still freaks out on anything kind of remotely scary. Like, she can't. Which is interesting to me, how desensitized um, kids have become when what they're calling a rated G movie scares the crap out of my daughter, and I got to be there to kind of explain to her what's going on, um, and that's partly why we just don't want that influence. So we don't watch TV. My wife makes most of our meals from scratch, and we haven't eaten fast food, not even probably as long as we haven't watched TV. We haven't eaten fast food, and so all of that stuff, yeah, she is a huge part of keeping me healthy. And then, of course, the fact that she's younger than me, I want to make sure that I look good for her, and I want to look sexy for her, and when I'm, 70 and my daughter's 20, I want to be vital. I want to be vibrant. I want to be one of those guys where it's like, what do you mean you're 70 years old? There's no chance you're 70 years old, right? So my vision is building my body to be able to take me to 110. And I figure by then, my kids will be fully grown. They'll have their own families. Maybe I'll be a grandfather finally, and I'll have lived a full life. So
That's cool. Are you hoping your son gets into sports? Have you ever gotten into or enjoyed sports and all that? What kind of extracurricular activities are you hoping he gets into?
it's interesting. We've actually just been talking about that because we don't really push anything on our kids per se, but instead we try to watch for what they instinctively, are interested in. And our daughter, and like I said, we don't watch movies. We don't have any of those outside influences. She reads a lot of books. She's reading and doing math and all that stuff at 5 years old. And um, we she's just a total girly girl, 100% girly girl. Has zero interest in any sort of like really physical stuff. But is a complete artist. She loves ballet. She loves ballet. She will get up. We have this massive coffee table in our great room, and she just gets up on there like it's a stage already, and she just dances. And she'll ask me if I'll sit down and watch her dance. And it's really adorable. And she's really good. Like, she's like watching the older girls, and she's like making all the faces, and she's like, getting into the drama, the music. It's really interesting. So it's like cool, and she loved it. So it's like great. That's we'll focus on that path. I would like to eventually get her, see if I can talk her into some kind of, maybe we'll do some martial arts together or something like that. Just so I'd feel better if she doesn't just totally grow up being a girly girl, but could be a girly girl, but also be able to defend herself if she needs to. Definitely going to teach her to shoot, um, and carry. And with my son, he is absolutely, I call him Bam Bam. I mean, he's a wrecking ball. And
So
so yeah,
two polar opposites.
two polar opposites. I think literally, like, probably rugby is in his future. I mean, something like that. I don't know about football because just the head injuries and that kind of stuff. I'm not quite sure, but that's what he really wanted to do. I would support that, but definitely, rugby or jujitsu or wrestling or something. He's just so physical, and he's a brick. Like, people are shocked when they go to pick him up because he's so dense, and he's already like a little, he's literally like a little muscle man. He's got little, like, he's got little abs, and he's got deltoids and got biceps.
That's cool.
He's not even 3 years old yet, and he's just got this smile, and just like his personality is insane. He literally lights up a room with his smile. It's crazy. And so yeah, he's gonna need to be in some kind of, physical sport.
Yeah.
Whatever that's gonna look like. I mean, he already has a great arm, and yeah, he runs around kicking the soccer ball, and I mean, he's been sprinting. He started walking when he was 9 months old, and by the time he was 10 or 11 months old, he was sprinting. And he's nuts. He's nuts. And so yeah, he definitely will, which is interesting evolution for me to think about, because I used to play. I played a lot of sports when I was a kid, but I didn't really get into any of them. I played some football, played some soccer, I wrestled, played some baseball, but I never really got into any of them. I really got into the music, and kind of went that route. Um, and I could see maybe Nevada potentially maybe getting into some of that stuff, but I think mostly she's going to be kind of like dancer or gymnastics or something like that. And then yeah, Maverick's going to need to be in something where he can hurt somebody.
That's awesome. Um, you know what I love most about what you just shared there is every time you talked about either one of them individually and the stuff that they do and the stuff that they're into. I mean, to witness not just the words you're saying, but to witness your face light up when you're talking about your kids and how, I mean, I can tell how much you love them and enjoy them. And that is just, that's awesome. I mean, I listened to everything you just said, but I watched your facial expressions and the way that you lit up when you talked about them is just awesome. That's
Yeah.
so cool. I want to ask you this I mean, obviously you're an older dad, right? And you got these two young kids. If there are maybe guys out there that are older dads or older soon to be dads, what
Mm-hmm.
advice could you give them from your perspective of being kind of this new dad in an older generation, kind of this new dad? What advice would you give other dads like that?
Well, I think it's super critical to have a youthful mental state. And for me, that kind of comes naturally. I know we joke about my wife being younger if and all that, but even when we were first dating, we would just kind of chuckle at because there are so many guys my age where you look at them and it's just like you can tell they just sort of like they've accepted the fact that they're old. And that's the end. I'm just old. And that's the end of it, kind of thing. I mean, the thing now, I mean, people in their 30s start trying to say that they're old. It's
Right.
like, you are what you say you are, is the bottom line. And I'm not joking when I say that I'm like, it's one of the things that I visualize on every morning and repeat back to myself is that I am building a body that's going to take me to 110 years old. Now, maybe I don't make it. Maybe I drop dead in an instant, but it's my intention to be vibrant and vital right up until the moment I'm gone. And I think that that's a super important mindset to keep yourself physically fit. I think it's because I mean, how am I gonna encourage my son and help my son and maybe coach my son or do whatever is going to happen if I'm not in good physical shape when he's 15 years old? I mean, who's going to teach him how to tumble? Who's going to teach him how to go down on the mat? Who's going to, I mean, I don't want somebody else teaching him that. I want to teach him that, and so I think that staying in good physical shape, I think staying in good mental shape and really getting clear on having for me, it was super helpful. I think I was still kind of a little bit of a deer in the headlights, even when my wife was pregnant with Maverick, with our son. But it was after he was born that I actually realized that, man, I gotta really get focused here, because it was also in the middle of COVID. Everything's, we were still living up in Washington State, super tyrannical governor up there, very vindictive. And it was kind of like everything was just kind of going sideways in the world, right? And it's almost like now we've gotten used to it going sideways. But I just remember thinking like, okay, I can either keep stressing out about all this stuff and focusing on all this energy on all this stuff going on out here, or I can really start owning the one thing I can control, and that's my own mindset, my own success, trying to put my family in as much of a bubble as possible. And so part of that was really becoming clear on my own kind of the legacy I want to leave, and becoming very, very intentional about how I live my life. Because if I do nothing else, I know that my kids, you talk about it, Ed talks about it, um, um, you know, not being, oh, sorry, I lost the words. You catch stuff.
Right.
You catch stuff by just stuff happening, and it's you're not caught. It's caught. It's not caught. It's caught. And
Right.
if nothing else, I want my kids to catch what it looks like to lead an intentional life, to understand what it is to get to be intentional about how you take care of yourself in the evening, and about what you do in the evening to make sure that the next day you're successful. And then what you do in the morning helps you then build on what you did the night before, and then go out and have an amazing day even when stuff starts trying to get in the way, and if I can at least instill that on them by them watching what I do instead of what I say, I think I've accomplished being an amazing dad at that point, let alone what I intend to hopefully be able to teach them as they grow older and we become friends, and I can take on kind of a mentorship role with them and that sort of thing. So I think really being intentional, I think it's a long way of saying really being intentional about where are you going as a man, where are you going as a father, and really getting very, very clear on that. I think that's very important if you're an older dad, because we on one hand, yeah, we're going to be 70 years old and our kids are graduating from high school if they go to traditional school. I used to have people make fun. I had a cousin who was like, "You're nuts. You're gonna be a freaking wheelchair when your kid's graduating from high school." I was like, first of all, I ain't gonna be in a wheelchair. And second of all, yeah, I am. And yeah, I am a little crazy. And you kind of have to be a little crazy, and really accept the fact that, yeah, you have to stay vibrant and relevant for the rest of your life. You don't get to just like, check out and say you're old and sit back and watch TV all day on Sundays, and whatever else a lot of people do when they get older. So you just have to bring a lot more intentionality to your life, because on the upshot, I think being an older dad, there's so much more you can teach your kids
Mm-hmm.
because you're seasoned. I've been through so many things, and I've failed at so many things. I've also succeeded at so many things. And so and then now, especially looking back at my childhood, it's like I have a whole different level of compassion than I did when I was in my 30s, and so I know that, I mean, I don't consider myself I was not equipped to be a dad in my 30s. I wasn't really equipped to be a dad to my two adopted daughters. But I definitely feel, and I feel like I failed them in a lot of ways, for that matter, because that's a really difficult thing, trying to raise adopted kids who have already been through severe trauma in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
and a bit and abandonment. And so I feel like in a lot of ways I failed them. And so with my biological kids, it's just like, okay, so I did this on purpose, and I don't get to just sit around and not be intentional about this. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I would say about being an older dad, is just get super, super intentional about everything.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely right. And as you were saying, our kids learn things, more is caught than taught. And the fact that you're leading by example, getting up early, working out regularly, you have a set schedule that you go by. When you're with your family, you're intentional with your family, you're with your kids. It's just that's what being a dad's all about. Is you're absolutely right. It's being intentional with our kids,
Mm-hmm.
because they need it. And I always have said this, and I will continue to say this: love, that kids spell love Time. That's
Yeah,
how they spell
totally.
love. And if you're not intentional with your time with your kids, you're going to lose them. And you're going to lose the space that you have, when you're going to lose the bond that you have with them. And when they're older and they're starting to go out into the real world, and real world hits them on the chin, they're not going to look to you for guidance and support. They're going to look to other people, and maybe it's habits. They're going to look to bad habits. Maybe, I mean, those kind of things happen. So the fact that you're doing that now with your kids is amazing. It's just awesome.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of the things that I talked to my wife about early on. We've done a lot of things sort of like, which funny is because just a lot of people look at it as unconventional, but we have home births. We don't know what the sex of the child is till it's born. We co-sleep, until they're ready to, either they're ready or we're ready to be done with it, kind of thing. And we just, and even to the point of being physical with our kids, and like we really like prayed a lot and thought a lot on like, do we spank? Do we not spank? We did it a couple times, and then it's like, because I like don't want to do it at all because of my upbringing, but then it's like, but they're getting out of control, and then realizing that they're out of control because I'm out of control, and so there needs to, the discipline needs to be in my discipline, and in me showing them how I stay calm even when they're not, and still being able to hold firm boundaries for them. They may still have to go to their room and calm down. And like I've even been we've been kind of getting into this process of like, they have to go to their room, but it's not a punishment. It's so you can calm down, it's so you can breathe, it's so you can get yourself recentered, and then come out when you're ready. Like, we don't lock the door, just say, come out when you're ready. And I'm really loving that, because to go along with everything else that I was saying that we do that some people consider unconventional with the spanking, I just feel like, knowing myself, even though that was an extreme scenario with my mother, even with the blankets and everything, and being able to kind of escape the physical side of the pain, it was always like hugely emotionally painful after that. I mean, when she would leave, it would just, it was the same thing as like when I was balled up on the floor when I was 3 or 4, and she's coming at me with a paddle. It's like, when it was over, it was just over, and she was gone, and I was left laying there on the floor, to just sort of pick myself back up and act like nothing happened, basically.
Yeah.
And so, but there's that betrayal, there's that emotional betrayal that happens, and I want to have the highest possibility of my kids being my friends as they grow up, and because I want my daughter to come to me. I don't want her going to a boy, right? I mean, she's of course going to have boyfriends, but I don't want her going to a boy for things that she shouldn't be going to him for. She should be going to her dad for that, And same thing with my son. And so even right down to how I treat my wife, how my wife treats me. We talk about this in the background, and to be good examples, because it sets the stage for how Maverick should treat a woman. It sets the stage for how Nevada should expect to be treated by a man, and even talking to Maverick about his physicality, and like and Nevada's been stepping up and saying don't talk to your mom that way, and don't talk to me that way, and and I, because I've been telling him that too, and telling Nevada, like Maverick, you can't hit your sister, it's not respectful, we don't hit women, gotta so on and so forth. And so we really want to create the highest likelihood that they're just like, we're just a tribe, like because for me, it's like, and for any older dad, it's like, you really are in this for life. I mean, I know we're all in it for life, even if you have your kids in your early 20s, but you're really in it for life if you're older, and if you're in the second half of your life and you're having kids. I mean, that just is what it is.
Yeah.
And so the more that I can create an overall structure around my family that bonds us together and keeps us close, I think that's really my number one priority around being a dad.
Oh, that's so good. Really, really good. Rocky, if my listeners want to look you up, learn a little bit more about you, best places for them to do that.
Well, personally, on Instagram, I'm just kind of getting back to posting a little bit on there, but it's just I.M.Rocko, Rocko. And then professionally, our engineering firm website is ADC Wastewater Engineering. Sorry, ADCWastewater.com is our website. And we're it's a lot of fun what we're doing with our business. We're starting to grow. We moved down here to Arizona so that we could expand, and now we're doing projects in Washington, Arizona, Montana, Idaho, and kind of focusing on working across the western part of the U.S. first, but eventually I want to be across the entire U.S. I've got some pretty cool um, growth that I want to see happen there out of opportunity rather than necessity. But just there's a lot of paradigm shifts we can create in the industry. I'm excited about that. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, I'm glad that you and I have gotten a chance to connect, gotten a chance to be virtual friends. I'm looking forward to I'm out in Arizona quite frequently because my son actually goes to college there. He goes to Grand Canyon University there in Phoenix. And
great.
so I'm out there quite a bit. Maybe one of these times when I'm out there, you and I will have to grab a meal together and chop it up a little bit more.
I'd love that. Love that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on, brother. I really do. Listen, guys, this has just been an amazing episode. I love Rocky and the story, and the way that he is intentional with his kids is just amazing. Make sure you guys are checking out what Rocky's doing. You can go to his Instagram. He is active on Instagram, even though he's just starting to get back into being more active. He does respond to his DMs and stuff. So if you have a question or something, maybe it's about a business, or maybe it's just about being a dad to younger kids, feel free to reach out to him. But as always, if you haven't subscribed to my podcast or my YouTube channel, make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests like I have on each and every week, like Rocky, my good friend now. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Data. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, dad up.